Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to our show. This is Sherwin from AP Baller, and what we are going to discuss tonight is the myth behind training only one way. I want to welcome our special guest tonight, the founder and head coach of Alliance Athletics, Matt Koenig. Matt, it's good to have you on the show, my man.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Sherwin. I'm excited.
Beauty. Okay, so before we get started on our chat, and we've had this chat in the past, I just want you to quickly take all of us through how you started AA and also quickly share your program's objectives for your clients. For those that don't know, of
hmm
course.
hmm Absolutely. Yeah. So Alliance Athletics is an online training platform, and it's specifically tailored towards athletes and individuals who are trying to live without pain and perform without pain. And then on top of that, it's designed to structurally balance the body, and to balance the body in terms of the forces that we experience while we play sports, and while we live our daily lives. Um, and so within that, we really focus on training with minimal equipment, minimal space, so that really just removes those barriers for people that want to get into high performance training, that want to just feel and look better, or maybe they're rehabbing an injury and trying to get back to 100%. What we strive to do is to eliminate those barriers of cost and maybe people don't have access to equipment or gyms or whatnot, and we just really try and give options to those people.
Awesome. Um, when you and I were chatting a couple weeks back, I really liked that example you gave about a car. So
Mhm.
tell us about the car real quick because I liked it.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I love to use that example. So one of the main principles that we follow, one of the philosophies that we follow at Alliance Athletics, is the principle of structural balance. And essentially what that means is that as you run or jump, all of the forces of your body are experienced differently based on where they are in your body. So for example, the feet will experience proportionately more force, actually, shearing forces, than, for example, the hip. Even though the hip is producing more force, all that force has to be transferred into the ground through the feet. And it works the same with the knees and the ankles and everything else. So I like to use the analogy of a car because the way I see it, and a good example of the body, is looking at a vehicle and saying, well, the main engine of human performance, generally speaking, in terms of speed and vertical jump, comes from the hips. Those are the largest, most powerful muscles in the body. And one of the I won't say problems, but one of the things that is overemphasized in the fitness industry, I believe, is the hips and is those larger muscle groups. And so people focus on putting a larger engine into a car. They want to drive faster or to have better performance. And while they neglect the suspension, the transmission, the tires, that are actually the limiting factor for how much that engine's power can be expressed by that vehicle. So if we look
Right.
at the human body as a vehicle, if we just say, oh, I just want to jack up the hips because I want to get faster, you can do that and it'll work to an extent, but eventually the tires and the suspension, aka the feet, the knees, the ankles, are going to be the limiting factor. And you can't just keep piling on strength and power onto there. You have to take care of those limiting factors first. Mhm.
Awesome. Um, so uh, I really like what that sort of what you've done with Alliance Athletics in building your own philosophy because as you know, philosophy is what you know to be true. It's what you've experienced in your time training, in your time playing basketball, uh, and that's obviously years and years of wear and tear on your hips, your knees, and your ankles. So now you've developed this training plan that sort of helps to save people, other people who are sort of young Mats of the world. So
Mhm.
similar to, not similar, but very different. Similar in that I have my own training philosophy. Uh, the training philosophy that we follow is more of like uh, a reworded from the last time, more like an underdog style of overcoming obstacles. So as you know, I'm a fairly short dude, but I was able to play university basketball. So my philosophy is to outwork, outpower the competition.
And lead the country in steals.
Yeah, top 10 for like a little while. Um,
There you go.
so, which, yeah, really, how it can be simplified is be faster, be stronger, be quicker. So, in getting to know our systems, um, I think there are a lot of people that believe that either you train with Matt or you train with Sherwin, when really this is the myth that we want to talk about. That's not the case at all. I think what you and I
Exactly.
had talked about was that it's almost like, again, going to that car analogy, you take care of the foundation and everything else becomes that much better.
Exactly.
So
Yeah. Everything else will fall into line once you take care of those limiting factors that often ail those athletes.
yeah, so I don't, and I know I've run into this. I know you've told me that you run into this where there's almost these comparison questions. Hey, Matt does this
Hmm.
exercise. What are your thoughts? Hey, Sherwin does these exercise. What are your thoughts? And it's almost presented in such a way that, hey, I'm going to test you
It's
with this
one or the other.
question. Yeah, what is it? One thing I really wanted to bring this up today is uh, the knees over toes split squat. I
Hmm.
been just knocking those out of the park on myself, and it's nuts how much better I feel um,
Hmm.
with just even with walking. I just feel like I'm looser. I feel like I can have, if I were to play, that I just have ultra long strides. So I really like a
We've actually
lot of the
had,
exercise.
sorry to cut you off. We've actually
Oh no.
had like some athletes give feedback like that where we've actually lengthened the stride, like for example, a long distance athlete just by opening up those hips and that range of
Hmm.
motion. Yeah, so it's
Yeah,
really good to hear.
it's nuts. Um, so obviously you and I have come into this agreement that both philosophies, both training styles can work amazing together, and that there is no such thing as one way or the highway. Actually, and you mentioned this last time about how we're doing our community a disservice if we want to hold
Yeah,
these sort of philosophy or philosophical competitions where, Matt does this way, Sherwin does this way, you got to pick. You can do both.
exactly. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's such a good point. I really, that was the one of the goals that I set out with Alliance Athletics was to really try to bring the community together. And I think like I'm really happy that we decided to do this because we're setting an example for others in the fitness community to do the same, and we're leading the way for that. And so I really like how you explained that um, they are two different approaches, but when put together, it's not like one way or the other way, but you actually want to take pieces of both and use both to your at your disposal. And the example of the knees over toes split squat, it's a great one because that exercise is not going to be the exercise that increases your maximum total body output in terms of power.
Mm-hmm.
However, it might enable more power to be expressed because you're in less pain. So neurologically, your body is like functioning better because you have less pain, you have more range to work with, and you're creating strength through those ranges. However, if we're talking max total power, you might want to look at something like a deadlift or a trap bar deadlift or something. But when
Right.
you put those two together, now you actually have better results than if you just focused on one or the other.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's certainly uh, some of the exercises that you've shown through your social media, it certainly changed a few things that I'm doing with my programming, and that's really how it is as coaches. Um,
Mhm.
um, if if you stop
Yeah, like
learning, if you quit learning, you're dead. And I think a lot of these things, what you provide is going to benefit my clients, and of course vice versa. And it doesn't even have to be me, and it doesn't have to be you. Like, we're looking at everybody's Instagram posts, and we see an exercise that, hey, that looks pretty solid. We research it, and then if it makes sense, we implement. So yeah, you're
Mhm.
much like what you've done to build Alliance Athletics, or what we've both done to build our programs. We take bits and pieces of everybody else's, and we start to formulate our own based off of our experiences to make our own philosophy.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And like I came into the training game, through working with you and taking your course. And so I'll always have, there's always little bits and pieces of some of the stuff that I learned right when I was starting out, that remain in my programming today, and like that stay part of my philosophy, and that I still implement myself. And so, you're absolutely right. Like it's all about learning, and it's all about being able to sort of see other people's perspectives, right? Because sometimes the other thing is, like, you might be working with a different demographic necessarily that I have. I know there's a ton of overlap, but there's also some differences in terms of the demographics that we work with.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes you'll be able to pick up those little sort of key nuggets by being open to learning, just like you said. And that really is the key as a strength coach. That's the unique thing. I think that's what draws us to the industry, is just that there's so much potential for learning, and there's so much new, not necessarily even like new, but there's so much like to learn still.
Yeah.
There's so much out there that you can implement into your toolbox, and then in turn give more to your clients, which is huge. And that's what we're really
Yeah.
trying to do, right?
Awesome. So Matt, with all the exercises, and I think that you and I, last time we talked, you had about over 200 exercises in your database. If you were to give your top two, what would they be?
Great question. That's a tough one. So yeah, we have a huge library of exercises. Um, I wouldn't say top two in terms of the best exercises, because it's really hard to, wrap your head around what the category is,
For
or how
sure.
you're gonna define that. But what I would say is the most key exercises for a young athlete to focus on, because these are some of the most overlooked sort of attributes in the game of basketball, or just in high performance training in general. So what I would focus on, we recently just did some work with some of the high performance programs in the province, and found that without exception, 100% of the kids in the program had reduced range of motion in their ankles, which can lead to excess forces being placed on the back, and ankle sprains, and just not able to play as low to the ground as if they had really strong mobile ankles. So I would say the first one is to focus on ankle range of motion with the Patrick step up to the ground, as if they had really strong mobile ankles. So I would say the first one is to focus on ankle range of motion with the Patrick step up. So you can do this with absolutely no equipment at all. You can do it from the ground, or you can use a couple books or a small platform to elevate your feet. And you're essentially going to reach down and touch your heel in front of your other foot that's anchored into the ground. And it's really going to open up your range of motion by stretching it out and then strengthening all of that range. So it's, in my opinion, the fastest way to improve ankle range of motion, better than static stretching or mobilizations. Like if you go to see a therapist, for example, this is, in my opinion, the best way to strengthen and open up that range of the ankle. So I would say the Patrick step up is number one. And the second one I would say is the tibialis raise. And the reason for that is that the tibialis anterior muscle right along the front of the shin is what picks up the foot, lifts your toes. And I just haven't seen anybody do it in the basketball community. I haven't seen people train their shins, and I think it's a very overlooked um, muscle group of the body, and it's your first line of deceleration that your body can employ. Like it's your first point of contact is your ankles and your foot. So if you can decelerate more, not only is your step back going to be better, you're going to be able to change direction better. You're going to be able to decelerate more effectively than the opponent. And in basketball, acceleration is huge, and that's what really kind of separates people. But the deceleration is also extremely important, and a lot of times athletes will be open on the court based on how well they can decelerate, right? How fast can they put the brakes on and then elevate it to their jump shot. So the tibialis raise, essentially no equipment again. You can lean up against the wall. You're going to put the weight through your heels, and you're just essentially going to lift your toes up as high as you can, squeeze that shin muscle, and then put it back down. And you're going to notice it's going to really improve just your lateral foot speed and your ability to put the brakes on.
Awesome. That's solid.
And then last thing I'll actually add is the cool thing is those two exercises, they pair very nicely together. So if you do one and then the other, they'll kind of open themselves up as a superset. Like one will improve the effectiveness of another when done together. So you can do them together as a superset. Great to do right before you get on the court.
Nice, solid. So now the couple of exercises that I would offer up to all of the young bowlers out there, one being a loaded goblet squat or a prying goblet squat. So we do a lot of loaded mobility work at the gym, naturally because we have the equipment to do so. So, but if you don't have equipment at home, that's not a big deal. You can, you know, stuff your backpack with a bunch of textbooks. Maybe you don't have a kettlebell, maybe you have a dumbbell. Anything really that has that will give you a light load. And what you're going to do is you're going to assume a squat stance that's slightly wider than normal, so slightly wider than shoulder width. You're going to pull yourself down, so actively pull yourself down, separate the floor with your feet. And once you sit in the pocket, you're going to pry your hips open with your elbows and sit in that for about 2 seconds. Come back up, still separating the floor with your feet. So there's always active activation with your glute medius muscle throughout the whole movement. And then repeat that for about 5 to 7 with that 2-second pause in the bottom. And again, and I think this next exercise, this all falls into how your philosophy and my philosophy can work well together. So you have a lot of stuff that lays down the foundation to be more efficient movers. So now this is a movement exercise that I like to give our clients during their agility days, which is basically practicing crossover stepping. So, and this is going to be best explained in the video that we're going to put on here. But basically what we're going to be doing is stepping over. If we start with the right foot, stepping over midline over to the left side. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to rotate at the torso while you're staying square to the action. If you don't have good torso mobility, then your whole body faces that way. Then you got to go the other way. And that obviously takes time. And you can, in that moment where you're unable to track the action, you can lose track of what's happening, where the ball is, where your defender is, because of that, the immobility, if you will, in that they can't move crossover step effectively and efficiently. So
That's a great example of like how mobility is often the limiting factor in sports performance, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure.
I really like that. And I liked what you said about the goblet squat and actively pulling yourself down. And those loaded stretches is what really opens up mobility. I love that.
Beauty. Matt, I want to thank you for joining the show today. This is a long time coming. And I think that, again, to sort of reiterate with what your philosophy, what your program stands for, complements other programs that are available in the city. And certainly it's it's complementing mine. I'm doing it right now. Some of the things that you have that you're offering. So anybody that out there really, if you do run into people that are saying that there's only one way in training, unfortunately or fortunately, they're wrong. That there are so many ways to train athletes, and blending of other programs can actually be insanely beneficial for that particular client. Because if we stop doing that, if we stop limiting, or if we start limiting our clients, then that affects the client and it doesn't affect us. And that's not what we're trying to do for our training systems.
Exactly. No, I thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Sherwin. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the kind words. You hit the nail on the head exactly with what Alliance Athletics is trying to do and how we're trying to complement other training programs in the city like yourselves, like AP Baller, like Acceleration Performance, and we help athletes get more results from those programs that they might already be doing in the city. So I really appreciate that. And just I really just can't stress how much I agree with that point about how if trainers come together and we collaborate and talks like this is what really elevates the standard in our locations and really gives the clients out there and those athletes out there the best product possible. So thank you for having me.
Awesome. All right. So until we meet again, Matt.
Absolutely. Have a good night.
Yeah, take care. Oh, one more before we close it out. If you aren't already following Matt, you can follow him. What's your Instagram?
So it's at alliance_athletics or at matthew.alliance. And you can reach out to us on Instagram. We answer every DM, every question. You can also reach out to us through our website, which is www.alliance-athletics.com.
Beauty. Awesome. Okay, thanks, Matt.
Awesome. Thank you, Sherwin.
Okay.